Did you know that the son of one of WWE's most feared Samoan warriors found his greatest victory, not in a wrestling ring, but in a Texas prison cell? You'll never believe how Zilla Fatu went from being a 15-year-old robbery suspect to becoming a 27-year-old Muslim convert whose transformation story is inspiring millions. Breaking. While the wrestling world expected him to follow his late father Umaga's legendary footsteps into WWE stardom, Zilla discovered something far more powerful than any championship belt, a faith that would completely reshape his destiny. But what could turn a teenage criminal into a spiritual seeker? And how did Islamic prisoners become his most unlikely teachers? Zilla Fatu was born into wrestling royalty that few could imagine. His father, Eddie Fatu, dominated WWE audiences worldwide under the fearsome ring name Umaga, portrayed as an unstoppable Samoan savage who demolished opponents with brutal efficiency. The Fatu family legacy in professional wrestling spans generations, with relatives including Roman Reigns, the Usos, and other WWE superstars who carry Samoan warrior traditions into modern entertainment. Young Zilla grew up surrounded by the larger-than-life personalities, intense physical culture, and global fame that defined his family's contribution to sports entertainment. From childhood, everyone expected him to inherit this legacy of athletic excellence and public adoration. But what forces were already working in teenage Zilla's life that would lead him far from wrestling rings toward prison cells? At just 15 years old, Zilla Fatu made the decision that would define the next 12 years of his life. Charged with aggravated robbery, he was sentenced to 6 years in the Texas State Penitentiary, an outcome that shocked his wrestling family and devastated his future prospects. The transition from relative privilege as a WWE legend's son to the harsh realities of state prison represented a fall that few teenagers could survive psychologically intact. Prison systems aren't designed for rehabilitation. They're built for punishment, isolation, and the kind of despair that destroys rather than transforms human potential. Yet something about Zilla's character or circumstances would allow him to find hope in the most hopeless place imaginable. But what does a teenage son of a wrestling superstar discover when stripped of family name, financial security, and personal freedom? The Texas State Penitentiary became Zilla's unexpected university, where courses in survival, human nature, and spiritual seeking replaced any conventional education he might have received. Prison life exposes the raw truth about human character in ways that privileged upbringings never could, showing who maintains dignity under pressure, who finds meaning in suffering, and who discovers purpose despite circumstances. For 6 years, Zilla witnessed every possible human response to confinement. Some inmates became more violent, others fell into depression, many lost hope entirely. Yet he also observed something remarkable that would plant seeds of his eventual transformation. But what specific experiences during those crucial teenage years began opening his heart to spiritual possibilities he had never considered? Among the chaos, violence, and despair that characterize most prison environments, Zilla began noticing inmates whose behavior seemed different from the majority population. These Muslim prisoners maintained daily prayer schedules despite ridicule from others, showed kindness toward fellow inmates when cruelty was easier, and demonstrated inner peace that their circumstances shouldn't have allowed. Their commitment to Islamic principles wasn't performed for guards or parole boards. It was authentic spiritual practice that provided them strength, purpose, and hope that no external conditions could destroy. Watching these men live their faith consistently over years of incarceration sparked curiosity in Zilla about the source of their remarkable resilience. But how could Islamic teachings offer something that family legacy, athletic potential, or even eventual freedom couldn't provide? Prison libraries aren't known for their extensive religious collections, but Zilla's growing interest in Islam drove him to locate every available resource about Islamic theology, history, and practice. Unlike casual curiosity, his study became systematic investigation into whether Islamic teachings could provide answers to questions that his imprisonment had forced him to confront. The contrast between Islamic principles about human dignity, divine purpose, and community responsibility, and the dehumanizing prison environment created cognitive dissonance that demanded resolution. His research wasn't academic exercise. It was desperate search for meaning that could sustain him through remaining prison time and uncertain future beyond those walls. But what specific Islamic teaching spoke most powerfully to someone experiencing the consequences of his worst decisions? When Zilla walked out of Texas State Penitentiary in March 2022, after serving his full 6-year sentence, he faced challenges that most people never experience. At 27, he had no work history, no education credentials, no clear path forward, and a criminal record that would limit his opportunities indefinitely. The wrestling legacy that had once seemed like guaranteed destiny now appeared impossible. WWE doesn't typically hire convicted felons, regardless of family connections. Yet his years of Islamic study and observation of Muslim inmates had planted something in his heart that imprisonment couldn't destroy and freedom couldn't diminish. His spiritual seeking had begun in captivity, but it would culminate in liberty. But how does someone transition from 6 years of forced structure to complete personal responsibility while maintaining spiritual momentum? Just 1 month after his release from prison, Zilla Fatu made the most important decision of his life. On April 3, 2022, he formally converted to Islam by reciting the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith that marks the beginning of a Muslim's spiritual journey. This wasn't impulsive reaction to freedom or desperate attempt to find new identity. It was the culmination of years of study, observation, and genuine spiritual conviction that had been developing throughout his incarceration. The date would become more significant to him than any wrestling anniversary, prison release date, or family milestone. His conversion represented victory more meaningful than any championship belt his father had ever won. But what specific moment or realization convinced him that Islamic faith was worth embracing completely? In 2023, Zilla decided to share his conversion story with the world through a YouTube video that would reach hundreds of thousands of viewers seeking their own spiritual direction. His announcement wasn't celebrity publicity stunt or attempt to gain social media following. It was authentic testimony about transformation that prison had made possible. Beautiful was the word he used to describe his Islamic journey, revealing joy and peace that his criminal past and family tragedy had never provided. The video's impact extended far beyond wrestling. Fans, to include Muslims worldwide who celebrated another soul, finding Islam and non-Muslims curious about faith powerful enough to transform a convicted felon into a devoted believer. But what specific aspects of his conversion story resonated most powerfully with diverse audiences seeking their own meaning and purpose? The contrast between Zilla's life before and after Islam reveals transformation that few people achieve regardless of circumstances. Where aggravated robbery had once defined his teenage choices, daily prayers now structure his adult routine. Where prison violence had surrounded him for 6 years, Islamic principles of peace and community service now guide his decisions. Where family disappointment and public shame had marked his early adulthood, spiritual fulfillment and divine approval now provide his sense of worth. His conversion wasn't just religious change. It was complete personality reconstruction built on Islamic foundations. But how does someone maintain such dramatic transformation when facing ongoing challenges of criminal history and family expectations? Despite his criminal record, Zilla has managed to enter professional wrestling with guidance from WWE Hall of Famer Booker T, proving that Islamic conversion enhanced rather than hindered his athletic potential. His approach to wrestling now incorporates spiritual principles about physical discipline, mental focus, and community service that his father's generation never emphasized. Rather than pursuing fame and fortune as primary motivations, he views wrestling as a platform for positive representation of Islam and demonstration that people can transcend their worst mistakes through authentic spiritual transformation. His in-ring persona reflects Islamic values about respect, dignity, and personal responsibility that contrast sharply with typical wrestling character development. But how does he balance entertainment industry pressures with religious convictions in a profession known for moral compromise? While Zilla's conversion to Islam initially surprised family members accustomed to Samoan cultural traditions, his consistent character improvement and spiritual growth have earned their respect and support. His transformation from convicted felon to devoted Muslim has restored family relationships damaged by his teenage criminal activity and imprisonment. Rather than competing with his father's wrestling legacy, his Islamic journey has created an entirely new family narrative about redemption, spiritual growth, and second chances that transcends athletic achievement. His example encourages other family members to consider deeper questions about purpose, meaning, and spiritual development beyond entertainment industry success. But how has his conversion influenced broader family discussions about faith, forgiveness, and personal responsibility? Zilla's story reveals how prison environments, despite their intended function as punishment, sometimes become unexpected places of spiritual discovery and personal transformation. His experience demonstrates that authentic Islamic community can flourish even in conditions designed to break human spirit and destroy hope. The Muslim inmates who influenced his conversion weren't trying to proselytize. They were simply living their faith consistently under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. Their example proved that spiritual truth transcends environmental conditions, and that authentic religious commitment can sustain people through trials that defeat those without faith foundation. But what does his transformation teach us about the relationship between adversity and spiritual growth? Through sharing his conversion story publicly, Zilla has become unwitting inspiration for countless people facing their own struggles with criminal history, family disappointment, lost opportunities, and uncertain futures. His example proves that authentic spiritual transformation can happen at any age, under any circumstances, regardless of past mistakes or present challenges. His journey from teenage criminal to adult Muslim demonstrates that Islamic teachings provide practical guidance for rebuilding lives shattered by poor decisions and external circumstances. His continued growth in faith while pursuing professional wrestling shows that spiritual development and worldly success aren't mutually exclusive when properly balanced through Islamic principles. But what specific advice does his experience offer to others seeking spiritual direction and personal transformation? Zilla Fatu's greatest triumph wasn't avoiding longer prison sentence, securing wrestling opportunities, or gaining social media followers. It was